Man, I got to go to God. We run all these other places and we try all these other things, and then finally we come to God. Boy, think about this. This man is bowing in humility. This leader of the synagogue, a Jewish leader, bowing in humility, pathetically pleading with all he had for his little daughter. That's amazing indeed, but don't mistakenly think that Jairus became a follower or was a follower. Don't mistakenly think that he was coming as a man of great faith, because we don't find that account. The simple fact was he was desperate. You been desperate? Well, I think we all kind of have an idea of what being desperate is like. Well, man, we just can't seem to control what's going on around us. He was desperate. He had heard of Jesus' miracles. Maybe he had even seen Jesus perform miracles. Boy, it's highly possible. Possibly he talked to some of those that had been healed by him. He was not sure about Jesus, but Jesus was his only chance. Isn't it funny how Jesus will accept us when we go to him as our last resource? That's fledgling faith. Man, it says, not saying our faith is not so totally grounded that, boy, that's the first place we go. And that's what we find with Jairus. He was like many of us coming to Christ. It wasn't not his love for Christ that brought him. And it was not what he could do for Christ that took him there. It was what his need was all about. That's what he was there for. It was his desperation, a glimmer of hope, a little hope that just maybe, I wonder if there's some apprehension. Maybe he'll reject me. Maybe he'll reject me because I'm a leader of the synagogue and he opposes, everything that our religiosity is all about. Maybe he had some doubts to that. Yet Jesus still works. On your outline, despair is commonly the prelude for grace. Despair is quite commonly the prelude for grace. Jairus' infant faith was going to bring a great reward, especially as we see Jesus develop the next events that are taking place. Mark records that Jesus immediately set out. No hesitation, no waiting. Jesus responded to the need. We should remember that. We should hold on to that. He responded to the need. And the man wasn't a believer. He had some fledgling faith. Verse 24 tells us that he went, and the great multitude that was following him was going with him, and they were pressing in on him. It must have been excruciating for Jairus. Imagine, his daughter is dying. He's trying to get Jesus there, and the crowd is all around and moving with him, and it's slowing the process down. Come on, we got to get there. Can you imagine? You ever been that desperate? You got a child that's sick. You're trying to get to the hospital, and you catch every red light. Man, I don't know about you, but I'm about ready to jump out of the car and just run, or maybe run all the red lights. And people do things like that. There was no ill intent by the crowd. The crowd wasn't trying to necessarily slow down the process. They were just interested and wanted to be a part of what was taking place. They didn't want to miss anything. Why does the traffic jam up when there's an accident on the other side of the road? I mean, it don't even have to be a serious an accident. A cop could have somebody pulled over. Somebody has a flat tire. And this side of the traffic just slows down because we're gawkers. We want to know what's happening. We want to see what's going on. That's just how this crowd was. And then to Jairus' dismay, imagine the sense of hope just going out of him. Jesus stops. The whole thing comes to a sudden halt. Roman numeral number 2 on your outline, Christ and the woman. There was another needy person there that day, an unknown woman with a hemorrhage. And we pick up her story in verse 27. She had heard about Jesus' healing power, and it aroused a bit of faith. She comes up in the crowd behind him, touched his cloak, for she thought, if I just touch his garment, I shall get well. And immediately the flow of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she had been healed from her affliction. She did that despite her uncleanness. You see, she could have been stoned. because she was unclean, and being in that crowd, there's no way she would have not touched people. And then coming and touching a rabbi, Jesus is the teacher, man, coming and touching him, making him unclean, would have surely caused her great harm. But she's struggling. Her life's a disaster. And that desire, to avoid the embarrassing crowd, to have to disclose her illness, her problems in front of everybody. Aren't we like that? Man, we don't want to tell the world what's going on in our lives. Well, maybe a little bit, just enough. But we don't want to say too much because you know what? Boy, what will people think? Or I won't be sufficient enough in myself if I ask anybody for help. Man, we are just a messed up bunch of people. We think we got it all together. Man, and we act like God. And we're not. This woman knew she wasn't. Man, she had done everything she could. She knew she was at the end of the rope. And I think sometimes we have to get to the end of our rope that our faith might grow. That we might just trust. We're a family. We are a family. Can you imagine that? You got to think about that for a while. We're a family because we are one in Christ. We are a family of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And yet we don't trust each other enough to share what's going on. Man, there's got to be something wrong in our lives that we don't trust enough to go to the Lord and go to the family and say, hey, would you pray with me? We'll run to the doctors, we'll run to everybody else, but will we go to one another and ask for prayer? She was alone. She didn't have any of that. She wasn't part of a family anymore. Maybe the family of the unclean. Like many people today, she believed that something, the garments or even the shadow of the godly, would bring hope. How many people run to faith healers? Boy, this person's doing some great things, and so often, boy, they're charlatans. But we want to try something. So Jesus, as Jesus passed, she momentarily closes her frail hands around his garment, maybe one of the tassels on the bottom of his robe, just momentarily holds on to it. I imagine she felt a surge of energy, man, touching Jesus. And it says that the power went out of him. And with that power, boy, a surge of energy. Every time John tests the batteries back there, he sticks them on his tongue. I think, hey, John can do it, I can do it. Stick that battery on my tongue, and your tongue kind of quivers and shakes for a while. Yeah, I imagine that's kind of what it felt like. Well, maybe it was just like plugging something in the outlet over there and really getting zapped good. And so the surge goes, and strength as the healing flowed through her body. And suddenly, after 12 years, after going through everything she went through, spending all of her money, she's made whole. Without a word, Jesus' power completely healed her in an incredible way in a crowd of people and trying to hide what was taking place in her life. We need to see that the same power that calmed the sea, the same power that healed the demoniac, is the same power that healed her, and that's the same power that's available to you and I today. Not in myself, not in my friends, not in the doctors and lawyers and Indian chiefs, but in Jesus. That same power is there. Now, I can't tell you why sometimes he doesn't heal us when we're going through, or heal a child. His plan is so much greater than mine. And sometimes he allows our hearts to be broken. I don't know why, but I trust him. I trust him. A, on your outline, time stands still. Verse 30, and immediately Jesus, perceiving in himself that the power proceeded from him, had gone forth, turned around the crowd, said, who touched me? His disciples, man, you look at a crowd that's pressing in on you, all these people, and you want to, how ridiculous of a question. Who touched me? Can you hear the sarcasm in that? Man, Lord, you got to be out of your tree. Maybe your family was right. Maybe you are losing your mind. How could you even think we could find who touched you? You see, he would have been touched by all these people. All those people pressing around. Imagine how many people rubbed his garments. Imagine how many people touched him, pressing in on him. And yet none of them was healed. Only this woman. Why is that? See, there's only one thing that I could see. Even though her faith was small, she had faith. The rest didn't have faith. They were just there for the show. That makes me ask myself. Makes me ask you. What are we here for? What are we here for? We're here for the singing. We're here for the word. We're here to be touched by the master, touched by the master's hand. We're here because it's routine. And maybe we should ask, why aren't we here when we should be here? This unusual expression has been understood in two ways of the power going out. One view maintains that God the Father healed the woman and Jesus wasn't aware of it until afterwards. And the other view is that Jesus himself, wishing to honor this woman's faith, willingly extended his power, willingly allowed his power to go out from him. And I think it's his later view that we have to hold on to, because that's consistent with his ministry over and over. Power didn't just leave him without his knowledge. However, he exercised it at the Father's bidding. Because Jesus said, I did nothing on my own, I only did what the Father was doing. Man, the Father is working in this woman's life. The Father was moving her. Jesus becomes aware and allows that power to flow out. But why does he question? Why does he ask that? And despite his disciples reminding him that he was surrounded by a pressing crowd, with a penetrating gaze, Jesus kept looking around to see who had touched him. Imagine how Jairus now must feel. Man, this is taking longer. You know, what am I going to do? My daughter's at home dying. It's bad enough we got this crowd, and now we got this woman, and now he wants to know who touched him. I don't care who touched you. Let's get on with it. My daughter is more important than who touched you. Do we not sometimes feel that way? Man, my cause is greater than everybody else's. Man, I need this or I need that. And we just get so eye-focused. Juan Carlos Ortiz, a Brazilian pastor, wrote a book on discipleship. And he says it takes an atom bomb to blow up the eye of self so that Christ might come into our lives and stay. I know the first time I read that years ago, I thought, wow, isn't it true? Man, I get in the Lord's way so many times. I imagine Jairus was irritated at this interruption. Precious time was being wasted while his little daughter was getting closer and closer to death. In my mind, I can hear him say, because I've heard me say, come on, get on with it. Man, what are you waiting for? The lights changed. I think I just said that the other day. What's your problem? Look at, man, now I'm caught by this light again because these people are so slow. And I'm just going home. It's not like I'm late for an appointment. It's not like I'm dying. But we get so impatient with everything. And I can see Jairus fuming. I can see him just about ready to explode at everybody around him. It doesn't matter who. At the Lord, at the people, man, at this crazy woman here. Why is she here? My need is so important. Imagine for a moment the woman. You see, you're moving back and forth in this story, this account here. Now, so you go and you start imagining her. What did she feel like? Man, Jesus wants to know who touched him. I don't want to have to admit my condition. I don't want to have to, tell people that I was unclean and I ran through the crowd. Everybody's going to hate me. They're all going to be mad. Her heart was throbbing, partly with joy, partly with fear. Her eyes tearing up with emotion. Christ was calling her to stand before this throng of people. But it wasn't for his sake. Don't miss that. Because, sometimes we don't go through this story and try to figure out what's all the angles